Okay, well, welcome everyone to History for Lunch. It's our second one for the month of September, and we're very excited to have Caroline Stevenson with us today. She is from Hertford County, and she's very much into filming, doing documentaries, narratives, plays. So as we were just discussing, Hertford County definitely has a lot of stories to be told, and we're just glad that they have Caroline to help them with telling their stories. And hopefully, if you happen to visit Caroline's page, she highlights a lot of individuals from Hertford County. So after looking at your Facebook page, hopefully we can have some of them or the individuals on, have them as invited guests to the museum. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn it over to Caroline today, and I'm going to let you get started.
All right. Good morning, or afternoon, I guess. Thanks for joining us. Basically, you know, I am a proud Hertford County native and resident. I have lived all over and traveled all over and worked all over, but, you know, I call Hertford County home, specifically Murfreesboro, which is the home to Chowan University. And history kind of runs in my family. My father, Frank Stevenson, is in his own right a historian and author. He's written about 25 books on local history here around Hertford County in northeastern North Carolina. And my mother was an architectural historian, so I kind of got it from both sides. But I am a filmmaker, so my true passion and love is documentary filmmaking, which I kind of don't get enough time to do because in my regular profession, I'm a member of the Directors Guild of America, so I work on like TV shows and movies. However, right now, because of the pandemic, I'm not working because I was laid off like many people, but it's been kind of good in a way because I've been home and I've been able to work on another doc series, which perhaps we can show another time, about called Brown and Daughter, and it's about an African-American farmer here in the Murfreesboro area and his daughter, and it takes place over several episodes. So, and kind of lastly, I run a nonprofit, a literacy nonprofit here in Murfreesboro. It's called the Cultivator Bookmobile. And we were the Cultivator bookstore, which we were the only bookstore in an hour's drive in all directions. So here in Murfreesboro, you can go to Elizabeth City, where there are 2 bookstores that I know of, if I'm not mistaken, Recycled Reader and Page After Page. And then if you can go into Virginia and find bookstores, you can go to the west to Rocky Mount and have bookstores. And if you go to the south, there are bookstores in Greenville. So we had to close our bookstore due to the pandemic, but we're now a children's bookmobile, and we give away free books in Hertford, Bertie, and Northampton County to kids. So we're really pushing to reopen in the space where I'm sitting, a 200-year-old house, in the next few months. So this film was made in 2012 with my husband, and basically it tells the story of Hertford County's 10 Rosenwald schools. North Carolina had more Rosenwald schools than any other state in the southeastern U.S. And I think that's really a testament to the leadership at that time. Of course, Rosenwald schools were built between 1912 and 1932 all across the South. Ms. Lori, do you want to go ahead and start the film?
Sure, I can do that. So let me share the screen.
It's about 35 minutes long, and then we can answer questions after. So thank you for joining us today. Awesome.
Okay, so hold on just a second. Okay, we're good to go.
Great, thank you.
The only school in the area. Yeah. it was the only place for kids to go to school. And I lived a couple miles from here, and I had to walk a lot of times to the school. So that means it was everyone in the surrounding area, at least a couple miles away, had to walk to the school.
And then by being segregated, you know, the white kids that live down the road here, the bus would come from up front, pick them up, turn around and go back. They didn't come to the school, you know, on the black campus.
Albemarle is an institution designed to keep a permanent underclass. It was convenient at that time to distinguish that underclass by race because they were definable more than any other criterion. It would now be economics if you were to bring it to present day history.
We walked to school every day. We bought our own lunch. It was cold at times, but it was a joyous time for us because that's all we knew.
I attended Mount Sinai School, also taught there, but I liked the school. It was 3-room school. They were good teachers.
They were good, excellent teachers. And they taught you the basics. I mean, you had to get it.
My mother always said we were going to school. My father didn't care whether we went to school or not. So in 1951, Easter Sunday 1951, we left church, went up the road there, and the house was burning up. And I said, thank God the house burned up. But Mama told Daddy, you're not going to farm no more. You're going to find a job and work 5 days a week where we can eat. We eat 2 days a week, Saturday and Sunday. And that's when we all went to school. Even in high school, we lost time out, so we had to work for different people. But my mother always said, you going to school. And that's one reason why I guess we got education.
It made me feel thankful for what I have now. Better education, more grades.
More than most counties, Hertford County was in its own mind, and I think to some degree accurately, the center of culture for this area. And the center of the county culture was the school. It was the one thing to which everyone went. All the other places you went were elective. You were required to go to school. And so it was the center of the community's existence. Then the community had come together and built the school. Someone donated the land, somebody gave the physical labor. So you saw that as you're becoming part of the legacy of it. And for that reason, you didn't separate the school from yourself. I never heard anybody say, I'm going to that school. They said, I'm going to our school. It's a very distinct difference in mindset that says, I'm going to my school and I'm going to that school, or their school, which was true after integration when they began to absorb some African American kids into the heretofore white school. Their mentality wasn't going to their school. Not here. It was, that's my school. And you fight you for my school. And so it was the core of the way we thought about ourselves. I was born down near the river, and there was a culture there on the riverbank that without schooling, that would have been my future. I would have been right there on that riverbank doing one thing or another, I'm not certain which, probably driving the tugboat. Now, while that's honorable, it would have been a disservice to North Carolina because I hope I've made a greater contribution than that over the years that I've been here. So I have an affinity for this place, but more especially for this institution. And there are other institutions similar to this one that were under-recognized and under-validated because it was at a time when you had a dual school system. You had the ruling class who were at that time white, making rules and policies that perpetuated their own lifestyle. And those rules promulgated in manners that really disenfranchised the great majority of African Americans from a quality of education. The exception to that were places like this, where you got education in spite of the Jim Crow notion.
I've always loved history. And the thing about history is that it needs to be passed along. One of my favorite shows was The X-Files. I remember one of the episodes, they brought in a Navajo, and they said that you can't get rid of this because we've told him. And according to the tradition of his people, he's told it already to 10 more, and they're going to tell it to 10 more. So you can't get rid of the story once it's been told.
When I left here, we were making 60 cents an hour. 50 and 60 cents an hour, priming that tobacco. And I got it when I retired out in 12 years ago. I was at $21 an hour, so that was quite a difference. But I can attribute it all to start back in as to what I saw and what I was taught, and that helped me in my life. I know it did.
Most of the Rosenwald schools had similar histories in that they were prized. And you would have had to really coerce me to miss a day at school. Actually, it would have been heresy to not go to school a given day. I don't have any reason. It was part of the culture that you knew that to get off the riverbank, you had to go to school. And so the incentive was implicit in just living on the riverbank, quote, or wherever it was you lived, where there weren't many upward mobility opportunities.
Mother, she was national benefit us going to school. My father, he wanted us to work with. So mom and dad had a thing, and mom said, no, we're going to school. So when mom and I went on to school, even though we came out of school, I came out 2 years later. But it didn't help me. I was determined to get an education. And after getting my education here, I went on to Chicago, stayed in Chicago for 47 years. And I worked for the Chicago Transit Authority. I also became a union man. For 9 years, I was a union rep. What was the largest union in North America.
We also knew that were there not free public education, we wouldn't have gotten any, because my family could not have purchased any education, no matter how menial the cost. They simply couldn't have done that. Honorable people though they were, they couldn't have done that. And so there was a premium in our mind and heart about free public education. So this school was that to me and to my peers.
business now, just size and fish, preserve business and that. And that's what we take our lunches to.
We brought homemade lunches to school. And that was very good too, because some brought a whole baked sweet potatoes or something like that, a fish sandwich or whatever. And back then we didn't take anything out, it was just good.
Winter time, we had winter. The ground would freeze from, say, November to about through February, I would say. And we would have to walk to school. And when we got here, a lot of times, we got here before the teacher got here. And we didn't have any way to get inside unless we improvised the way. So we did, we went through that window. That was off from the ground, so we had to get up there. We started out with pushing one another, and they got hard. Then we found a log.
Yeah.
Put up there, and we clammed up the log. But we went inside, we made the fire, and when the teacher got here, she was happy because we had got inside and made the fire warm.
Right.
So she never got on our case about it.
Yeah, right. That's
you know what I mean?
And we didn't have a lot of clothes, but my parents made sure that they were clean. Sometimes we had to dry our clothes beside the heater, which was a wood heater. So clothes wasn't a factor for us. Education was a factor.
I was pants with holes in them. My shoes had holes in them, one hole. I mean, basically, we were poor people. My mother and father would share problems, okay? And they didn't have money until later on while we went to work at roadside manufacturing of the gas. But we just wore regular clothes. We didn't have any clothes.
Sharecropping was an institution in which the landowner, quote, hired or employed someone to tend his or her property on the condition that you would yield a crop, and they would sell it, and you would reap half the benefits thereof. As an institution, however, it didn't work that way at all, because generally the same landowner owned the country store, and you bought the seeds from him or her, and you bought all the tools and utensils and artifacts for farming through that. So at the end of the year, if you broke even, you'd done really well. Generally, you hadn't broken even, so you couldn't leave. You had to stay there for the next year, so in the hopes of one day breaking even.
And every year was bad. First year, you made a little bit of money. The next year, you come out even. The next year, you was in the hole. But at least you back used to always say, well, I'm going to give you $200 to buy Santa Claus and buy the kids some clothes. But you always stayed in the hole. You didn't never get out the hole.
And that's because of your lack of education. You went along with whatever the man said that you were working for, because you didn't know how to keep the books. So you went along with what he said. You didn't have an education. So you had to go along with what he said. You took what he said.
Yeah.
And so therefore, you always was in the hole.
So sharecropping is one step above slavery. That's one. Not a very long step above slavery. The difference being that at least in slavery there was full employment. Sharecropping not necessary. So you could be chased off the land any given day. It was the most insidious institution that I know of during slavery. There were farms all around, and during what we refer to as the harvest season, school closed. The black school closed for sometimes as much as 6 weeks while the harvest would be going on. When that tradition ceased, then you would have what we call the short day schedule, harvest schedule. We get out at 1 o'clock, and I'd hasten to somebody's farm and shop peanuts. I never was good at picking cotton necessarily, but it was fun to be out there with people who could.
But there were missing days sometimes when we did have to stay out and help support ourselves, because I came from a family of one spouse. My mother, she was really up, 3 children, and we really didn't let us stay out a lot. She worked like 7 days a week, but we did miss some school days, to have support ourselves on the farm. We had to stay out and work on the farm. My sister was
school would open up like 1st of September. And 1st of September, they would start picking cotton. So I might get 2 good days or 1 good day in school, then I was in the cotton field.
Until after Thanksgiving.
Yes, sir.
Until after Thanksgiving. After Thanksgiving was really the time that we basically got back into school full time. And it caused so much to fail. You know, I failed a couple times. But it was because I didn't put in the days, the required days, you know. And it wasn't that I was couldn't learn. I could learn, but I just didn't have the time in the schoolhouse, in the school home.
During harvest season, we had half day at school. We got out of school about 12. We went home to cotton and chicken peanuts and corn.
And they had half a day, so by the time we got to high school and everything, they weren't giving you time off. No, you
No,
just
but about your day, now they wouldn't give it to you.
they were giving us stuff, so we were absent. I was absent, but I didn't use that as an excuse because my daddy was a sharecropper. He didn't own his own land, and it was 9 of us. Some of us were gone by then, but that made me work harder to excel. You know.
I would say that the economics of farming per se, sharecropping and all the rest, were insidious into that too much of it did depend on child labor, because you would see little children out in the field picking cotton, and they wouldn't be picking much, but daycare wasn't available, so if a parent was picking cotton, the child would be out there.
So you had to stay home when it was time for chopping or picking peanuts or shaking peanuts. You were required to stay home and then go back to school like in the wintertime. But our parents required us still to study and pass their grade.
I think the least that I liked about school was the fact that I did do a lot of homework and it was complicated when I stayed out the block. So my excuse in one sense was that I didn't work hard at learning, studying. So that was my weakness. But my favorite was coming to school where I had a chance to be with other students that was my age and conversation.
Typically, you would find that the Rosenwald School was staffed by the most sufficient teachers. Obviously, in the Black community, they couldn't teach anywhere except at Black school. So we had the cream of the crop. Further, most of them saw teaching as a calling. It wasn't a job. When I was hired here, no one told me what I'd make. I had no idea what my salary would be. I was hired here. I was getting ready to go to California, of all places. Already had my ticket, and the principal called and said, "We need you to come, lost a teacher." And I came because I thought I owed it to the school to do that. I didn't ask, "What do you pay?" I didn't ask what are the hours. I just came. Good, I'm getting to work with my alma mater.
One of the things that stood out at one time school was the classroom had anywhere from 3 to 4 grades in one room, just like this room here. We'd have first grade here, second grade here, third, fourth. Then in the other room, we'd have 5th, 6th, and 7th. And in the 8th grade, we would go to Rosenwald School.
I was in the 1st grade, when I got to the 2nd, I knew what the 2nd grade was like, because I was listening to them when they were teaching. Got to 3rd grade, I knew what all of it was like. I thought they learned a lot, because you learn from each other, and you lots of times you learn from students, as well as the teachers.
It was a second-hand education. When the state started furnishing textbooks, the blacks got what was left over from the white school.
But then we were getting the leftover books. A lot of the books we got were used books.
Yeah, we never had.
We didn't get new books, we got leftovers.
books that
So
I
that,
had other kids' names.
Yeah, all of
Oh,
yeah.
So it was a hand-me-down book, but that's all I had to work with.
And we did learn out of those books. We learned what was in the book. This school didn't have a library. You know what Miss Katie Hart?
Yeah.
She would come down and in her car, she would have a bookload of carload of books. And she would come down here. And the teacher would have us come out, line up out here, and ask us, we could go over here and choose what book we wanted to get.
If I could change something about the fence, I probably would change the fact that a lot of our grandparents and great grandparents dropped out of school, because I know personally some people who don't want to continue high school and don't want to go to college because their parents didn't go to college and their grandparents didn't go to college. And I feel like maybe back then, if we could have changed how certain stuff was, like racism and different stuff like that, I wish that none of that would have happened, so everybody could have been able to just learn together, and maybe the education would probably be a little bit better now. So I would change that.
The commitment of the faculty was the core. I saw my teachers at Sunday school, I saw them in the barber shop, I saw them in the grocery store, I saw them everywhere that I went. So they were part of the fabric that I grew up in. There wasn't a separation. I mean, teaching was something you were, it wasn't something you did. And that kind of atmosphere means there's nowhere you can go and avoid education. I mean, wherever you are, education might show up there, an artifact thereof. And I think that would be true of all the Rosenwald schools, because again, they all had a similar culture. We just thought that was the best place you could possibly be.
I know that those teachers had my education at heart when I was in school, and it helped me. And I knew my parents knew that when I left home that morning, that those teachers were concerned about me. And they could release that disciplinary hand and knew that I was going to be well taken care of when I left home and go to school. You know, it's not like that today.
It was
they were
closer
together. Yeah.
because everybody that lived down this road and in the area on a Sunday morning, you would see them at church over here. Church get out, and then they would come back here and they would visit, one another. And it was more of a closely knitted. And if his father saw me doing something wrong, he would tell my father, and my father would chastise me or correct me, and his father would do the same thing. And that helped the community to be more together, to have more concern for one another.
You had to speak correctly. You had to do your arithmetic. You had no choice.
You had to learn how to write.
Right.
You don't know how to write.
You had to learn all of that, and you couldn't get out of here because they knew your parents.
If some of the teachers knew some of the kids' parents out here, maybe some of the kids out here wouldn't act so crazy all the time. But yeah, I think it was an advantage.
I loved everything. I loved the teachers. The teachers were not only our teachers, they were our mothers and our fathers. They took an interest. They went beyond just what we learned in the classroom. They were calling us during the weekends. And I remember Miss Elsie Bottoms, one of my high school teachers who lived in Murfreesboro. My parents didn't have a vehicle, so I couldn't go to a football and basketball game. And she said, "Margaret, you want to go?" Yes. And she took me to the football games and the basketball here at CSB.
And so that invitational atmosphere predominated the Rosenwald School. I don't know that it was all over everywhere, but I do know that the ones I'm aware of, which are many of them, that was the atmosphere. Kids just couldn't wait to get to school. I hated for someone to come. Absolutely hated for someone to come. Gosh, I won't see my friend again until September. And I mean, I didn't hate what I would do during the summer, because that was for the most part fun as well. But to be away from school for 3 months was torture for me, and for most of the kids I know. So I think the transition from the church-based school to some of the attempts at school that were made significant in that you begin to see yourself differently as a student. And I still think one of the greatest influences on education is how the student views himself or herself. More than anything else, an assurance that somebody thought school was worth your going to. I think there were exceptions, but I think generally most of the students that I know thought that was a promotion to get into a better funded school and one with stability that you thought would be here year after year.
I think the quality of our education now is better than what they had. We have more of a diverse community at school, and we have more resources to work with than what they had at Rosenwald Schools.
If you calibrate the real purpose of education, if you believe, as I do, that it's to make a better society, it hasn't made a better society in recent years. I have no children, I've had no children. I'm as adamant about my neighbors' children being educated as I would be where I'd have some. I don't want to live next door to uneducated people. And I don't want to have to interact day in and day out with people having no education. I work just as hard. I've never complained about the tax rate. But I want all the children to be educated. That was the ethos in which I grew up. That no longer prevails. And as long as that doesn't prevail, there's going to be tinkering at things called reform, which fall short because they have no defined mission. You cannot reform something unless you have a mission and definitive notion of what it will look like when you shall have done it. We don't have that anymore. So yes, my education, not schooling, education was superior because there's differentiation between school and education as far as I'm concerned. I think people are working the hardest at school than now they've ever worked at it, but they're doing it in silos, striated, and it's focused on passing a test at the end of the year, which may or may not be applicable to living or to getting along in society. And that's a mistake, blatant mistake. And I spend most of my waking hours trying to figure out how to correct it. Haven't found it yet, but I'm still looking for the remedies to that.
We are phone. Yeah. We spent the majority of our time on the phone. On the phone. We only came to school on a rainy day. When the weather was adverse. And I don't even know, in a school year, I don't know how many days I missed, but it was quite a few. And that made me really to be a little bit backwards when I moved up to the high school and everything. I still was on the phone. In other words, I feel as if I didn't have the adequate education to go out and face the world. So when I got out in the world, as a matter of fact, I left here and went in service. And I found out that I just didn't know where kids was, coming from different parts of the world and everything. I got a muscle. I had to stand there and listen. I couldn't be part of the conversation because I didn't know what they were talking about. So I had to get back in school after I left the school system to get myself up to par with the rest of the people I was associated with.
At the very base level, education is a motivation for somebody to achieve more. I mean, I can have all the computers in this class, but unless somebody is motivated, then they're just gonna gather dust. The alumni that I've heard, they appreciated and they had that drive, and their drive didn't stop once they finished high school or finished their schooling, but they were given the basics to continue on. And that's what we need to at least instill today.
Maybe they could restore the Rosenwald buildings and have it where it's like the old classrooms so students could see how it was like, and maybe have some of the things they used to have.
Fix it up like it was back in the day to see what they had to work with and what they had to go through.
you need to have a way to connect with where you were and where you came from so that you can appreciate what you have right now. Because if you don't appreciate it now, you lose respect for it.
What would I say to today's generation? I would stress education. They need education. But I encourage you, feel great, don't let it deter you. Don't let that stop. Continue on.
Well, times have changed, and the generations now, it's a different generation. They're not as respectful as we were.
I just don't want students up all the time. You can tell students who come to you that parents talk to and tell them how to respect you. And you can tell those that don't. And it makes a difference when you're trying to teach. If parents have a voice in their learning, they do better. If they don't care. And of course, we have the blame that we're not doing anything. But it's not that, we're doing what we can, but we can't do with what we don't have.
Every day should be filled with learning. Learn all you can each and every day. Never let a day pass in school that you don't learn something new. Always learn to listen, to study, to be respectful of your classmates, schoolmates, respectful of all of your teachers, principals, people. To get the best education that you possibly can, and to learn to communicate with all groups and kinds of people.
Life is not easy, but you learn through the struggles.
I would tell them, remember your heritage.
Think. Get in the habit of thinking. Learn to enjoy thinking. Learn to enjoy analyzing, synthesizing, problem solving. And nobody can keep you from being educated if that were to happen. No matter how poor your experience might be at school, you're only there 4 or 5 hours. Look at all the rest of the time you have. Do things that will cause you to grow and advance. And dream. You'd be astonished how many dreams have changed the world.
All right.
So, if Caroline, would you like to comment, or are you ready for questions and answers?
I guess I'll just make a couple quick comments. Basically, we've was released in 2012, and it did play at some various film festivals, and it has played at the NC Museum of History before and the Museum of the Albemarle before, and a couple of Rosenwald conferences. It is available for free if anybody wants to show it to for themselves or for educational purposes, and I included the link there in the comments. I mean, I always feel very uncomfortable talking about talking in general, because I feel like I'm not the right person to tell these stories, but they're important enough to me that they need to be told. And I'm glad that we made this movie and continue to do the filmmaking that we do here, but I feel in an uncomfortable position a lot because our subject matter is primarily African American history, and that's not my personal background. But I feel kind of in defense of the subject matter that African American history can be very fragile and very completely underrepresented in everywhere, museums, archives, etc. So I'm really glad that we've made this film, because a lot of the voices that you have heard, a lot of the people have passed away or moved away, or would not have access to their story or their information. So, you know, I'm glad we did it. But again, I am hoping that younger generations will come up and see the importance and take over this work. And I'll support it 100%.
Well, I think it's a very interesting. I think there's a lot of stories that are not being told that need to be told. And I personally feel you all did a wonderful job at documenting. So if anyone has a question, if you could please type it into Q&A and we can pull that up. So.
And yeah, I'm really happy that to have a chance to revisit it again, because I think a lot of the things a lot of the comments that the people have made are very relevant today, as they were, you know, 8 years ago. So I'm happy that it still has some legs, so to speak. So.
I honestly, some of the comments that were made, because I can remember going to school, if you don't behave like you're supposed to, I'm going to tell your mama. And so that, I think we move around so much today that we don't have, that our families have dispersed to go other places, that we don't always have that. I'm going to tell your mom, or I'm going to tell your grandma on you. So we do have one question. How long did it take to produce the film?
Not long. I would say no more than 6 months. This was all self-produced and self-financed, so to speak. I mean, my husband and I were basically the crew, along with the students at Hertford County High School. So we didn't really have a budget, so to speak. We just had a mission to tell this story. So I want to say we had our Rosenwald, it kind of started with the Rosenwald Reunion Day that was in September, I believe, of 2011, and that was at C.S. Brown Cultural Arts Center, which is in Winton, which is one of our 2 African American high schools that we had in Hertford County. So I would say from September, and it was released, that was a long time ago, but in the spring of 2012, excuse me. So yeah, no more than 6 months. I like to put my mind to stuff and do it. So for better or for worse.
So do you know which North Carolina Rosenwald school was the last to close?
Ooh, that I wish I knew the answer to that, but I don't. However, that's a great question. In my own experience, I went to Riverview Elementary School, which it was not a Rosenwald school. The Rosenwald school that preceded the Riverview that I went to burned in 1944, and then the one that I went to was rebuilt in 1946, which was after the Rosenwald experiment, so to speak. So, but you know, I was also very influenced because the majority of my teachers were African American. Obviously, this part of northeastern North Carolina is majority African American, and I remember singing, you know, Lift Every Voice and Sing at like every assembly, and being very influenced by that national anthem, so to speak, for the rest of my life, basically.
Awesome. Oh, we have one other question. Have any of the 4 remaining Hertford County schools been repurposed?
Yes and no. The Millneck School, which has been kind of the center of the story. So the Millneck School, we were able to get it on the National Register of Historic Places, which is amazing, which was one of our goals at the end of that film. And it now, in Como, where it's located on Highway 258 North, there is a historical marker on the highway that denotes the school's location and proximity. But in terms of repurposing, the C.S. Brown Cultural Arts Center, which was one of our Rosenwald schools, is kind of repurposed as a community center, cultural arts center. I do a lot of volunteer work for them. That's located in Winton. We're having like a gospel, open air gospel program in October. So that one is still fairly active, even though the building was built in 1925. I mean, they're very old, so they need a lot of funds and a lot of upkeep, but we're lucky to have the ones that we do have. Their R.L. Van, which was another school in Ahoskie, that one, part of it is used, but not necessarily the Rosenwald part. The Pleasant Plains School is still standing. It's also on the National Register, but it's not really used for anything. And then there's one more that has really deteriorated since we made this film, which is not usable anymore. So kind of yes and no. I mean, they're old buildings that are now almost 100 years old, and it just takes a lot of investment and reinvestment to make them into something.
Okay. So our next question, I appreciated your film very much. Have you seen the film on the Rosenwald and his schools produced by is it Kempner?
Kempner, yes. So I have seen her film. I want to say it was actually produced after this film. It's just, she has a lot of very prominent people. I mean, this film is very local to Hertford County in northeastern North Carolina, and hers has a much more broad approach. She has a lot of celebrities or famous people, notable people who are interviewed in her film. I've seen it. I did really enjoy it. It's a very different film, but you know, along the same lines of, you know, these schools were really important because they basically changed the course of American history, and that's why the story needs to be told and remembered and told again.
So do we have any more questions today? If not, Caroline, thank you so very much. And for everyone, we hope to have Caroline back in the near future because honestly, you're working on one about women, correct?
Yes, so there's a lot of irons in the fire. I tend to keep very, very busy. But after my African American Farmer series that will be done in November, then I'm going to be working on a Northeastern North Carolina women's documentary about just where we are and where we're going.
Awesome.
So I think someone might.
Yes. Let's see here. So California, North Carolina, is that in Manteo?
Oh, that's a great question. There's an area here in Hertford County, near kind of between Winton and Ahoskie, and it's called, people call it Little California, but it's just kind of an informal name for like a community. So it's not like organized or chartered in terms of a township or a real, place. It's just kind of what people call it, Little California, and there was a school there.
Awesome. We have, let's see here. Is Cotton School, they are still standing?
No, no, we have lost a lot of them. And that was one that was kind of in the woods, in ruins, so to speak. And we have, pictures of some of them. We don't have pictures for some of them. So the Fisk University has a Rosenwald School archive, and a lot of the information pertaining to Hertford County came from there. And you can search up your county. If you just Google Fisk University Rosenwald Archive, and then you put in your county, you can see a list of schools that were built with Rosenwald funds. So we had 10 in Hertford County. Other counties like Northampton had more. I don't know the number off the top of my head. They had a lot more than we did. And then further to the west of Northampton, Halifax County had the most Rosenwald schools in the state of North Carolina. And obviously they're very closely tied to the African American population in those counties. So the higher the population in general, the more schools they have. So, yeah.
So any more questions today? Awesome. Thank you again, Caroline. We appreciate you joining us. We appreciate everyone joining us also for our History for Lunch. And just everyone, please stay safe. The museum is open. So we're open Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. until 4 p.m. So, and it's free. So please, if you're in Elizabeth City, stop by and see us.
Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Miss Lori. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Everyone, have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.